Good afternoon, everyone. It is 2 minutes after the hour, so we're going to get started. Welcome to the Propelics and iTexico webinar for April, HTML5 versus native applications, demystifying the decision process. My name is Eric Carlson. I'm going to be your moderator for this call with Adam Bookman and Richard Dutra from iTexico. We're extremely excited about this webinar. We have the most attendees in all of our webinars what we've been doing for the last year or so, over 350 registrations, and we see a lot of those folks being able to come into the meeting now. We also have a lot of our clients on the call, so welcome Joel, Russ, Mike, Jeff, and Tim. It's great to have you guys all here. Before I turn over the call to Adam and Richard, I wanted to go through just a little bit of background on both of these two companies. As I said, my name is Eric Carlson with Propelics. Propelics creates mobile strategies and world-class applications for the enterprise. We primarily developed these enterprise mobile strategies for organizations in the Fortune 1000, but do some work in the mid-market as well. We are 100% focused on mobile for the enterprise. It's all that we do. And we are based here in the U.S. in San Jose, Boston, and Pittsburgh, but we also do these rollouts for organizations and their operations across the globe. You can see some of our sample clients that are listed here and some of the use cases from these clients Adam's going to speak about during this call. We help our organizations primarily in 3 different areas. We do a lot of work in enterprise mobile strategy services, and these are primarily kickstarts related to specific aspects of mobile strategy as our organizations and our clients move through the maturity model. And so whether that be mobile app portfolio creation or helping out in the scoping and planning of a specific mobile app idea, we help a lot of IT organizations build a plan for readiness for mobility when it comes to network and security and governance and other types of areas. We help a lot of organizations in understanding where BYOD fits in their needs and how to be able to secure and manage devices through MDM or MAM. And lastly, we do a lot of work in terms of helping organizations visualize mobile application ideas and how to move beyond just another screen into very innovative types of use cases. We also help organizations out in terms of advisory services and being able to mentor and do some executive education. And we also work with a great partner we're going to talk about next, iTexico, in the use of user experience design and some application development and architecture creation. iTexico is our partner. They're based in Austin, Texas, with a Western region office in Silicon Valley. Their nearshore development and delivery center is in Guadalajara, Mexico, and they focus on extended teams as a service and multi-platform mobile solutions. iTexico is a Propelics partner in building and managing mobile and technology solutions, and they really bring 5 major differentiators to their and both our clients. Collaboration, iTexico's goal is to become an extension of existing development and support teams, whether that be virtually through the Guadalajara Development Center or on-site teams at client sites in the U.S. IP protection, with their development center located in Guadalajara, and because of NAFTA, client IP is the same level of protection as company based in the U.S., which is important for many of our clients. iTexico's operational costs are significantly less for the Guadalajara Development Center, and those savings are passed along to their and our clients. And their technical expertise, their team of developers, trainers, and support staff are all highly trained through an excellent academic and certification system. And lastly, their large differentiator, and especially for us, is being fast to market. Their teams use agile development methodology, participate in daily scrums with our clients, and being in the central time zone makes it extremely easy to collaborate with client teams through the day in real time. We listed a few of iTexico's clients, and they're proud to have both Global 100 clients as well as some exciting new startups as part of that client base. For us and for their also clients, they provide all aspects of really the mobile app development lifecycle, including strategy and architecture, user experience, and user interface design, multi-platform mobile development, website and back-end development, testing and QA, assurance, and deployment and support. And so without further ado, I'm going to do a couple of introductions here. With me from Propelics is Adam Bookman. Adam has been the brains behind many mobile product and program launches. He's advised companies on mobile strategies for business as well as IT, and he continues to be a trusted advisor to some of the leading brands across the world. He's a frequent speaker at conferences related to mobile across many different verticals. And also on the phone, we're very happy to have Richard Dutra, VP of Business Development from iTexico. Richard's a Silicon Valley executive entrepreneur who loves building startups and being part of the ground floor companies. He believes mobile will be the single most important device we own, and its capabilities are endless. So with that, I am going to turn over the controls to Adam, I have a couple of small areas in terms of a couple points. First of all, we had a lot of attendees and we have a lot of registrations for this webinar, and we had a lot of questions that came in for specific topics. We tried to include as many of those as possible in terms of the content we're presenting here in this 1-hour webinar. But if we missed your topic, please use that link, propelics.com/let's talk, and we'll set up a conversation with Richard and Adam to be able to handle those questions directly. In your screen on WebEx, there's a Q&A form. Please use that Q&A form or use the chat to the panelists, and I will be managing some of the questions, and we'll have plenty of time at the end for me to be able to ask those questions and pose them to Adam and Richard. And lastly, we're also following Twitter, if that's your thing. We have a hashtag mobile strategy, which will also be watching for questions and other types of comments throughout the webinar. And with that, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Adam.
Great. Thanks a lot, Eric, and welcome everyone to the webinar. Thanks for the great attendance. This seems to be a pretty hot topic with our clients and our prospects and the people we speak with at conferences. What we're going to do today is talk a little bit about market trends of what's going on out there, why this is a hot debate, and then get into a little bit of the differences between HTML5, native, and we're going to throw in hybrid apps because hybrid apps are a major consideration. We have 6 considerations that should help you decide HTML5 versus native, and then there'll be ample time for Q&A. Again, if we've missed your topic, you have the ability to go to propelics.com/let's talk and ask your question there, and we'll get that answered. So let's get going. This is kind of a famous statistic by Gartner now. It's from a couple of years ago that by 2015, 70% of your customer interactions will originate from a mobile device. We use this a lot because we're seeing this to be absolutely the case. And because this is the case, businesses like yours have to react to mobile, both on the customer front, on the employee front, on your B to E to C front. And what we've seen was that primarily last year was the first year that most of our clients and prospects started to plan for mobile. And 2013 is really turning out to be the year of action. This is when mobile is getting done. And not only is the focus on B2C apps, the focus is really quickly shifting to B2E apps and also to business to employee to customer, the apps that your employees use when they're in front of their customers. And the drivers are moving way beyond BYOD and the pure technical conversations into actual app ideas and good mobile use cases. And you can see kind of this chart here of mobile use cases like CRM, work order management, and the change from 2011 to 2012, and they're pretty stark changes in applications that are being deployed on smartphones and the really good use cases that are coming up within organizations. Companies are really beginning to identify how mobile can impact their core metrics. But the decision there lies, how do you build these apps? What technology do you use? So I wanted to kind of end the debate right now before we even begin, because just a couple of days ago, there was an announcement from Flurry. They did a large study with ComScore and net market share, and kind of hit the media that the mobile war is over and the app has won. They looked at time spent on iOS and Android connected devices and found that 80% of the time that users spend on their devices are in apps, and only 20% is in the browser. So there was a lot of news going around that the decision is over, native is won. And I'm not sure if everyone on the webinar today feels this way, but certainly not so much within the CIO community. The next day after that study came out, there was an article in Read Write Mobile that HTML5 is alive and well with CIOs. And there are lots of really good reasons for this, and we're seeing this definitely, we're seeing this all around, that CIOs prefer to use HTML5 technologies for a variety of reasons, and we'll get into some of those today. So clearly, even though Fleury declared the debate over, in the enterprise, the debate is not over, and it continues on. So the one thing that we wanted to point out here is that regardless of CIO need, and even though there is a preference, there seems to be a pretty large preference among CIOs to focus on HTML5 or the mobile web, that it is the experience that creates the demand. And the experience that users do prefer seems to be in apps. And you can look at this chart that was released very recently by BI Intelligence, and it looks at the total mobile app and web duration, the duration of time people spend in apps or on the web, and the duration and the experience that they're having is significantly higher and increasing on the app side. But that doesn't mean that there aren't good use cases for HTML, for hybrid, or for native. It just means that it's very important to make informed decisions, and that uninformed decisions can result in considerable extra expense, maybe even dissatisfied users, poor performance, and ultimately a bad experience. And what we're really going for are good experiences. So for the majority of this webinar, we're going to talk about, how we can demystify this decision. And to do that, we're going to look at 6 key considerations. And here are the considerations. I'm going to go over the first one, then turn it over to Richard to go through the next 4, and then I'll come back and discuss the last one. So the first one that I think is absolutely critically important that everyone should really keep in mind is that before you make this decision for your organization, say we are an HTML5 shop, or we're a native shop, or we do hybrid, and we hear this a lot. We only do HTML5, and that's the way that we're going to go. We're suggesting that instead of making those decisions, let the mobile use case drive the decision. And avoid the square peg round hole syndrome, and don't try to stuff a use case into a technology that really is not optimal. A lot of folks asked questions before the webinar began, and a lot of those questions were, can you provide some pros and cons of HTML5, hybrid, and native, and some use cases where they make sense. So I'm going to turn to that discussion of some of the pros and cons, and first start with HTML5. The biggest pro of HTML5 is that you can build it once and deploy everywhere. That's kind of the dream of HTML5. And to a certain extent, that dream hasn't come to a reality. But some of the good things about HTML5 are that, one, there's lower cross-platform deployment cost. The speed that it takes to update an HTML5 app is a lot faster because you can update it once and it will update really for everyone on any device that they're using. Our enterprise customers really like HTML5 because typically they have the skill sets already available today in their shops, and they don't have to go out and get additional skills, or the ramp-up time is a lot lower to train people on HTML5 than it is on some of the native languages. And that goes to the quicker learning curve bullet. And then the other thing is there's no App Store approvals needed. On the con side, some of the biggest knocks on HTML5 are the performance of HTML5 apps just aren't up to snuff with native. Pixel perfect UX is really not possible within an HTML5 application. A lot of the gestures and multi-touch commands, multi-touch gestures are, from a UI perspective, are not possible on HTML5. And so when users are looking at mobile apps, they expect the mobile experience, and they don't really care if it's HTML5 or native. APIs to specific platform features are not available. You're unable to, if your consideration is monetizing this app, that's really not, it's not as good of a way to go than putting your app in an app store where it's really easy to monetize it. And then there is the whole idea of inconsistent browser support. HTML5 does not work the same across browsers, so it isn't universal. There's a graph in here about which browsers support which features, and we'd like to direct you to a site that we think is really good. mobilehtml5.org, and this is a great resource that maps specific HTML functions to different mobile browser versions. But let's get to a good use case for HTML5. We have a client, I think some of them are on the call, that they're rolling out, they have a global BI system, and they want some folks to, when they're on the road, to be able to go to their BI system. And what they found is this is not a constantly used system. It's very intermittent. They are rolling out globally to a large diversity of devices. They have many different OSs. In this case, it's BYOD. And the idea for the BI system is they're just consuming content. There's not a lot of interaction. You're not entering any information. You're just looking at reports. In this case, it makes sense really to just roll out with an HTML5 app for your BI system. And a lot of the BI vendors and a lot of vendors in your enterprise apps, when they talk about mobile, they talk about HTML5. Another good way to think of HTML5 is if you have indirect traffic coming from search or social, so people are coming to you through a search engine or from a social media site, directing them to an HTML5 page could be the way to go. A lot of our clients' websites, when we go to their web pages, we see that they're not mobile-enabled sites, so externally facing websites are another good candidate for HTML5. You could build a mobile-specific website or even a responsive design website, so you build it once, and then whether you're on a PC or a tablet or on a phone, the site shrinks to the right screen size so you can see the information. And HTML5, another consideration is who is your user population and where are they and when will they be using this? Will they be using this? HTML5 makes the most sense when you're primarily connected. Let's move on to hybrid. Hybrid really, simply is an HTML5 website with a native wrapper. And this allows you to control the HTML centrally, so you still have less code to support multi-platform because you can update the HTML, but it's wrapped in native, so you can submit your apps to the various app stores. So you get that app store experience. On top of that, you also can access device-specific features through the use of APIs. And it is possible to make changes to the app without resubmitting it when you just modify the HTML5. You still have some of the cons that you have with HTML5. Performance is generally, it could be a little bit better than HTML5, but still very browser dependent. It does require some more specialized development skills than HTML5 because you have to understand a little bit about the native languages. One of the biggest knocks on HTML5 apps, or on hybrid apps that are in the App Store, is that you end up with apps that don't look native. There are a lot of great technologies out there that allow you to make your apps look much, much more native. But you can certainly tell the difference. You don't have that pixel perfect UX and a lot of the controls that you have with a purely native app. You also risk an app store rejecting you, and mostly this is on the Apple side. And lately, Apple's been rejecting some HTML5 wrapped apps that don't really do anything different than the pure HTML site. And I wanted to bring this quote from Gartner, and I'm not sure how accurate this is, but Gartner predicts that by 2016, over 50% of mobile apps deployed by the enterprise will be hybrid. So they're seeing that the combination of availability of resources in the enterprise combined with the need to drive a mobile-like experience through the App Store experience is a really nice trade-off. And that's true to a certain extent. And again, we want to make sure that you're looking at the use case, the specific use case, and when it makes the most sense. So we think that hybrid makes the most sense when one, you need to accommodate multiple platforms. When there's a lot of direct traffic, so you have people coming back, either they're consumers who are coming back to your app or looking for your app on an app store, and they know that they want to go there and they go there right away, or it's an activity from the corporation that you're asking people to go to again and again. We believe that generally still content-centric consumption is a little bit better use case than any heavy interaction, although we have clients that are building HTML5 wrappers and putting them in app stores as hybrid apps for like workflow related tasks. We have a customer building that hybrid was a perfect solution for their problem, where they had a learning app that was web-based but wasn't behaving well on tablet computers. So they were able to build quickly a hybrid app that made the experience, kind of took away the problems that the browser was causing them. And took away the browser toolbar, so the address didn't appear there, and created a little bit of a native experience. And you can see here this picture of Wikipedia, where they have their app. It's pretty much their mobile website or their website, but you don't have the browser. It looks like it's an app, even though it's really going directly off of HTML5. And there's a little bit better offline support and some more kind of caching techniques that you can use in a hybrid environment. And then finally, native. Some of the best things about native is that these are really what the devices were made for. They provide a rich user experience. They often bring the best app performance, which is really critical, especially if you have folks who don't have the best connectivity. They happen to be the most secure, and Richard's going to talk about security. With native, you can hook directly into all the device APIs, and new techniques and technologies that are available on the device are available on the devices first, and then HTML5 catches up later. So there's still a number of features that aren't available on all browsers through HTML5, and I'm going to talk about a few of them in a minute. Native apps allow you for extensive offline support. So if you have a need for people to use their apps in offline mode, or really they're using their apps and interacting a lot in remote locations that don't have good access to Wi-Fi, then native apps make a lot of sense. And obviously the monetization front, you're able to monetize your apps. The cons that folks say about native is that it's more difficult to support and maintain. You have to create updates for each of your native apps on different platforms, on iOS, Android, Windows, BlackBerry, update them separately, submit them to app stores. It takes more time to update and then distribute them out. The skills can be much harder to find. There's, if you do build a native app in iOS, it's very, very difficult, if not impossible, to port that technology over to work on an Android device, unless you use a cross-platform development tool like Accelerator, which is a partner of ours, where they make it quite easy to port your apps from iOS to Android and soon to come BlackBerry and Windows. The other con of native is that it's a little bit more expensive when it comes to development, both in terms of the time that it takes to deploy and the price of the skills that are necessary. I wanted to point out this quote from RedMonk, which is another research house, and James Governor, one of their co-founders, said that the CIO may think that they're going to spend the next 2 years deciding what the next hybrid app framework is, but in the meantime, there will have been an awful lot of iOS and Android apps built. And we think that this is the case as well, that sometimes the consumers, especially in the last few years with mobile, definitely, consumers are making the choices, and consumers want to spend time on apps. And it could be the case that based on the use case, the choice is made for you. But when does native make the most sense? Native makes the most sense when you have a heavily used you have an app idea that's going to be heavily used, that needs to be fast, that's used by people who come to your app directly, that you're making use of device features like camera or calendar, background notifications, orientation, like when you change it from portrait to landscape, a camera appears, or if you've seen Google Maps, where when you shake your device, you can ask for help. These are an NFC, near field communications. These are some things that are not readily available across browsers on HTML5. Another point is that when user experience is paramount, you get the absolutely best user experiences with native. And we see these in cases where you have consumer apps that need to go out to the public, and you want to make sure that you have great brand visibility and acceptance from that front. Or you have B to E to C apps where you have if you're an insurance agent and you're going to a meeting in a coffee shop and you bring an iPad and you want to go through some quotes, and your end customer is seeing the app being used, you want to make sure that you have a great user experience. When security and controlling distribution are of utmost importance, native seems to make a lot of sense. And when you need offline support or store and forward, when you have use cases in those remote areas, or with folks who are in buildings where they don't get any good internet access or connectivity, native might make a lot of sense. So hopefully that helps. Those are some pros and cons and some use cases. But kind of to close this topic out, wanted to mention that we hope that you can resist the one-size-fits-all temptation and really let the use case drive the decision. But now I'm going to turn it over to Richard, and Richard is going to talk about the next few areas. Go for it, Richard.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that, Adam. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, in the availability of development skills, we really need to think about, first of all, this is really huge. And this is one of the biggest drivers of the initial upfront cost for building a mobile app. What we have here is really some considerations that we have to make. We have to understand how many platforms we need to support. There's iOS, there's going to be Android, BlackBerry soon, or now, even if you're using an older version, there's Windows, and even Tizen, which is the future platform coming out by Samsung. And what we need to do is really to understand not only how many form factors we're going to support, but how many phones or tablets or even phablets that are going to be part of our planning. And if we are planning to build with a native app, we pretty much need to understand and know that we're going to need specific developers for each platform or developer teams. And so, as you know, you're going to need Objective-C developers if you're building in iOS, or Android developers for Android, .NET developers for Windows, and so forth. But here's the real conundrum, and I think it's really important to understand, and we in our company know this, we see this all the time, is that the chances of finding somebody who is good at all the development platforms is really hard to find. And in fact, if any of you out there have found a person like this, please let us know, because we'll hire them today. They're just a rare breed. And even those developers with the web technology background, though they are more abundant and they are easier to find and cheaper than web and actually native developers, we still are finding that when you get to the point where you find front-end web and mobile developers for the web, that these people are still very much in demand with their skills too. They're very much being sought out because these people are good at multiple scripting languages. They're good at CSS3 and, most importantly, JavaScript. Also, they know the Backbone.js for the JavaScript frameworks, jQuery, mobile, Dojo, and Twitter's Bootstrap framework. So really, these are relatively new technologies. And finding experienced people is always going to be a challenge. If you decide that you want to go to the hybrid route, again, you're looking for somebody with the skills I've mentioned above, including JavaScript knowledge and really knowledge of the platform that you're going to use. But again, don't get delusions of grandeur because they are still hard to find. In fact, at iTexico, what we've done is we've resorted to pretty much training our incoming staff, and we have in-house trainers who do this, and we hold classes every month so that we can get the skill sets that we really need for customer deployment and for potential customers. So if you do decide to support more than 2 platforms and more than 1 form factor, then understand that the cost of building native apps gets pretty high versus the cost of building a web app. So my recommendation out of this is that if your budget costs are an issue and you're really going to have to support multiple operating systems, then HTML5 or a hybrid approach is the best way to go. Next, we'll talk about maintenance and support. And this is really, the understanding here for most people is, okay, I've written my app, great, go. People will use it. If I build it, they will come. Not true. In fact, what you should get in your mindset is that once I build my first app, that it's guaranteed that you will release more versions as time goes on. And in fact, afterwards, when you release that first app, then you will start planning for releasing your next versions, whether it be for bug fixes, introduction of new features in response to user feedback, or just improving the overall user experience. Because as we know, every iteration that we develop, we're going to find something new that we want to put into the next release. And the 2 factors that really complicate the situation here for native hybrid apps over web apps is, first and foremost, and we all know this is a wish list because it really doesn't happen, is we need the users to download the latest versions from the App Store. But there's really no way that we can manage that or manage their behavior. So that is something that is completely out of our control. And secondly, in the iOS App Store, as we know, there can be a lag for updates. It can be as much as a week or a little more, but that can be frustrating. However, as we know, in web apps, you don't face these challenges because your users are always using the latest version. Let's talk about testing for a second. And this is really a major factor and a big part of maintenance and support. And these resources really start adding up when you want to support multiple platforms. So you're going to need a lot of devices to test for each of these platforms. And again, even if you decide to build in the web apps, you should not underestimate the cost associated with optimizing for the various browser versions for different devices and manufacturer combinations that exist out there. There's too many of them. So you must make sure that you keep that into consideration. Sadly, and I think all of us have experienced this from time to time, and we know people that do, is for whatever reason, they're still locking down the Android handset. So there's going to be a lot of combination of older versions of browsers and operating systems and devices that you're going to need to support. So for iOS devices, we still have that same problem, but we're finding it at a lesser degree and on a smaller scale. And assuming, of course, that there was a business objective behind your app, you will have analytics and performance monitoring on your devices, and it will be built into your app. And again, that means that somebody is designated or needs to be designated to the task of monitoring and interpreting, and of course, making actionable recommendations based on that. So bottom line here is we need to think about planning and budgeting for supporting our apps throughout its life cycle to protect our investments. Because if we underestimate the budgets, it will come back to bite us. Next, I'm going to discuss performance. Now, I think that we all know, either we all own, or not all of us, but many of us own different devices, but basically the person that started this whole thing was Steve Jobs. And I just have to say, wherever you are, Steve, thank you, because now everybody expects a really great performance from their phone. It's just we're spoiled. And a central part of the user experience has become not only the performance of the application on our mobile device. So we are a society of instant gratification, so we want the latest thing that goes the fastest. And I think as we look at this, we need to understand that performance really comes from two forms. It comes from rendering and it comes from loading. And basically loading is fetching information from a server, while rendering is displaying that information on a device. So if we were to compare them side by side, native apps really have the advantage because all the assets such as images and backgrounds are packaged into the app. And this really means that we don't have to download, and they are much faster. Now, the problem is, or the situation is, native applications have set the standard for what a user expects from a performance perspective. And there is a big gap. This is one of the big differences between native and HTML, and it is really great because when you see or talk to ordinary users and you talk to them on the street or you talk to them at work, you will easily notice the difference. Doing such things as we do on our phones, like scrolling or swiping or rotating the phone. And this is a big difference. For the hybrid apps, from a performance perspective, I just want to make the distinction between two approaches. Firstly, we have Apache Cordova style hybrid app, and the other is Appcelerator's Titanium-based app. Apache Cordova, for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, is basically PhoneGap. And the PhoneGap approach is essentially packaging a web app inside a native container and rendering the web app inside a web view. So essentially what you're having here is a website inside an app. In comparison, Appcelerator's Titanium uses a much different approach. It doesn't use web views. Instead, the JavaScript API is mapped to the native code, and the compiled code is native binary. So there is still an interpreter running, but the app is a native app. From a performance perspective, if you look at PhoneGap, it's the same as a web app, while the Titanium-based apps come very, very close to a native app's level of performance. So you're going to see a big disparity there, or a big difference. My recommendation here is that if performance is not an issue for you, if it's not critical, then go to a web app or a PhoneGap style app approach. Otherwise, if it is, then you'll want to stick with a native or Titanium app. And my last point is on security. Along with performance, really, security is one place where native shines over web apps. And we see it all the time when we're building applications for our clients. Some of the points that we really need to cover here, and these are very, very important, and the first point is source code visible. As we see, more and more of the application logic in HTML5 apps is now stored in the client-side JavaScript. And it is relatively easy for someone with malicious intent to see the source code. This is not good because, unfortunately, we have come across a number of sites, many sites, where even the API keys were visible. And what we need to take away from this is it's really important to use good coding practice when writing good web apps, because security is a major issue for clients and users. Next, we have URL-based vulnerabilities. Just beyond sloppy practices, web apps are also susceptible to all the usual suspects of cross-site mapping, cookie manipulation, and, of course, SQL injection. So, again, we need to take these into consideration when we're looking at the security issues of web versus native. Next, we have data on device. We know that HTML5 now offers the ability to cache data within the browser, and since both basically native and HTML5 applications manage data on the device, this data should really be appropriately secured and encrypted while at rest. So, in addition to that, both iOS and Android allow you to encrypt stored data, but there's really no equivalent capability in the HTML5 world, and this is a real important consideration. And secondly, within that, MDM and MAM vendors really provide another level of security for native apps because they can't affect the data on a browser's cache, and they can't secure it. And finally, my point of data in transit, SSL is the most common way that both native and HTML5 apps secure their data in transit. And finally, what we're finding is that additional levels of security are being put together by organizations who are implementing VPN. And while they can support both native and HTML5 traffic, there is significant performance overhead. So on one hand, it comes to data in transit. HTML5 does force a trade-off between performance and security. So my final recommendation here is if security is a critical issue for your application, whether it's B2B, B2E, B2C, or any combination, as Adam had said previously, then native apps are your best bet. Thank you. Now I'll hand it back to Adam.
Hey, thanks, Richard. So our final consideration before we wrap it up is something that I've been seeing a lot over the past year, which is companies relitigating the decision for every app idea. And this often happens in some of our larger clients where there are many different business units and they're all trying to figure out, what mobile apps to build, generating mobile use cases and identifying mobile ideas. And then after that happens, maybe technology teams or innovation teams within the various business units look at, should this be an HTML app, a hybrid app, an HTML5, hybrid, or native? Often this decision gets made over and over again with pros being developed and cons being developed, and we strongly recommend that you build a framework for HTML5 versus hybrid versus native decisioning within your organization, and you disseminate that information, to the various business areas. Where some of our we're using our mobile COE Kickstart as a great service as a way to kind of build some energy around mobile standards within an organization, and this is one of the major standards that we talk about in how to make the choice. We talked a lot about the pros and cons, so when you're building your standards document, you can use some of the slides above, and all these slides will be made available after the call. But a few other things to consider I wanted to point out. One is really look at who's the user population and what devices are we supporting. Are we talking about customers? Are we talking about employees? Are the devices corporate owned? Are they BYOD? Do we just not have any idea of who's going to be using what smartphone they'll be using to access our app? Is this a tablet app or a phone app or both? I wanted to point out some statistics. The first piece are corporate activations. Good releases quarterly activation reports, and in the last quarter, they found that 77% of corporate activations, and this is a rising number almost every quarter, are iOS activations. And the combination of iOS and Android account for 99.7% of all corporate activations for both smartphones and tablets in the enterprise. So when you have a BYOD community, at least for now, when you talk about building native apps, that really just means iOS and Android. So sometimes you can get scared away by building native apps thinking that you have to build iOS and Android and BlackBerry and Windows, but unless you have a very unique situation, it could be the case that you can just get away with building iOS and Android. And even in the public market space in the United States, iOS and Android account for 91% of smartphone activations. So this isn't to say that Windows and BlackBerry in the future won't catch up. For right now, and the trend seems to be staying in this direction, iOS and Android are really the native components. So a few scenarios here, we're finding some of our clients, one of our big clients, they've just done a global rollout where they've provided iPhones to their business community. So they know that they can build native apps, and they just need to build it for iOS. They don't have to worry about BYOD or consumers, because they know what devices their population is going to be using. So that helps their choice make it a little bit easier. We have a client that's rolling out a big reservation system in the United States and globally, and they've made the choice to build a native iOS app, a native Android app, and then use HTML5 as a catch-all. So folks on Blackberries or Windows phones, or even on iOS or Android devices, can look at your HTML site. So sometimes it's an all of the above solution and not just one or the other. Another consideration is, what are you really doing with, what is this use case? What's the purpose of the use case? Is it to just extend a current enterprise system to another screen? And if so, and that's a system access. If you're just looking for greater system access, maybe HTML5 or hybrid makes sense. And a lot of the vendors that are extending their access, a lot of the BI players, a lot of the CRM players, they're building hybrid apps that allow you from a phone, maybe from a tablet, through a native app to access the corporate system, but it really is just a wrapped website. But if you're really looking for process innovation, to change business models, to change user behavior, to think of new ways of interacting with your customers, and that's real, true process innovation, you maybe lean towards native or a hybrid app that kind of is fully baked in. You've added a lot of layers in of iOS, of hooks into the device, through the device APIs, whether it's iOS or Android. I just want to make the final push here on let the app use case drive the decision. And on top of the pros and cons that I mentioned on the first couple of slides, there are some other considerations on top of functionality for the app, which is, where are the people who will be using this located? What type of connectivity they have? How frequently will they be using this app? How critical is this to your core business? How critical is it to your brand, to the visibility of your brand? What type of a message do you want to send with this app? And are you using pieces of functionality? If notifications are really important for you, then a native app might be the way to go. If NFC is important to you, native might be the way to go. If you're just looking to containerize your website, hybrid might be the way to go. And then obviously, like Richard mentioned, performance, security, and support considerations all should be put together in your standards document that you can give out to your teams within your company to ensure that you're not making this decision over and over and over again. So just kind of wrapping up, these were the 6 considerations. Hopefully this is helpful information for you to take away. The slides will be available actually right when you leave this webinar. You'll be able to download the slides. The recording will be made available for you in a day or so when we can get it up from WebEx. But before we go, and I turn it back to Eric for some questions, and there are a number of questions, wanted to bring up this final consideration, because I see this a lot, is that there is a large cost of doing nothing, of spending too much time on the decision and not making a decision. And some of our clients are delaying, but we think is a little bit too long in making a choice one way or the other. And try to caution you to make a decision, avoid analysis paralysis, and just get going with one of the frameworks. And then there is the ability to adjust. And it doesn't have to be we've picked HTML5 and that's what we're going to do. You can try out the various different different ways of deploying apps, and we strongly recommend doing that based on use cases. And Eric, I'll turn it over to you for some Q&A and a special offer.
Great, thank you, Adam. So just as to follow up on Adam's last point about analysis paralysis, we help a lot of organizations in making this decision related to a specific application or building that framework as part of a mobile center of excellence or as a document to be able to use as an inbound decision-making tool for business teams and IT teams to determine what type of approach we take based on these application requirements and needs. It's part of our mobile app scoping and planning kickstart, and you guys can see some of that on our website. As a special offer from both Propelics here and iTexico, we love to be able to talk about these challenges and provide some user experiences and some real-life experiences that we have been able to see at other clients, and we can very quickly be able to talk through some of those types of areas be able to understand and kind of pinpoint what some of the challenges might be and be able to at least maybe relate a few examples to you that might help you on your journey. And so that would be an hour advisory call. Clearly, you can talk to us at info@propelics.com or 88 numbers right there, or you clearly know where our website is. So getting into some of these questions, this is for Richard and for Adam. Ed asked a great question around, he writes, the desire is for reuse of development of both iOS and Android development. Is HTML5 the answer, or is there a better choice for multiple platform development? Is there our only option?
Richard, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I will. In fact, what I'm going to do is ask that I brought on board one of our technical people. He's our CTO, AP, and AP is going to be addressing some of these issues. AP, are you there?
Hey, hi guys. Yeah, I'm there. So Ed, the answer to your question, I guess there's many ways to skin the cat, so to speak. One is obviously HTML5 is the answer. There is other, some of the platforms that Richard mentioned in the talk. PhoneGap, Apache Cordova, that's one option. Accelerator is our preferred option for multi-platform development. Again, because it's it does have really good performance. So those are a couple of options. There's other platforms around. There's MonoTouch that we haven't really used extensively, but I understand they're fairly decent when it comes to allowing code reuse across multiple platforms.
Thanks, AP.
Great, thanks, AP. We had a question come in prior to the webinar, and I think we've talked about some of this, but maybe to be more specific on the technical side. Tim asked, I'm interested in learning more about HTML5 from an architectural perspective. Mobile's becoming hot at our company. Maybe AP could talk a little bit around some of the popular frameworks and other types of things on HTML5 side, and where people should start looking and start to learn a little bit more about HTML5 development and using that in their architectures.
Sure. There's a bunch of there's a bunch of good frameworks out there. Take a look at something called Dojo. There is Sencha Touch. There is jQuery Mobile, and then there's also MVC frameworks for JavaScript like Backbone.js, and also Twitter's Bootstrap framework. So all of those are really good resources and tools to learn about HTML5 and good frameworks to use, to keep your code organized and keep it maintainable.
Great. I had a comment, and I think something that both maybe you and Adam might be able to answer. This comment was from Adam. He said, our hybrid definition seems limited. You clearly can have native application have many native features without just being a wrapper, which is a great point I think I should talk about a little bit more.
Yeah, so I'll touch on it at a high level and then let AP get into the technical aspects. But that is absolutely true. HTML5 or hybrid apps give you some flexibility. You can at the very low end just create a thin wrapper around your HTML5 site and then kind of call that a day and submit it to the App Store as a native app. Or every day there's more and more the technology is getting better for using hybrid technology to hook into device-specific APIs and to use the device-specific cache, to use the camera features, GPS features, a lot of the native features that are not fully supported by HTML5. So you can fatly wrap a hybrid app, and there are some technical considerations there and the skill sets that need to be involved, and you get into some of those higher skill areas to make those really good apps. AP, do you also want to comment on some of the other things you can do with hybrid?
No, I guess he's right. I mean, there's no good standard or definition of what people call hybrid. If you talk to some people just using a JSON API to get data, they'll say it's a hybrid app. But really, I mean, again, the spectrum of hybrid apps goes from all the way from like you said, Adam, just wrapping a website, to using a multi-platform tool like Accelerator. Again, there's PhoneGap, and it provides a lot of, like PhoneGap, for example, will provide a lot of plugins that you can write to access device-specific features that are not available through, through HTML5. There's a large kind of spectrum of what people call hybrid, and it's somewhere between web apps and native apps.
Thanks, guys. Another question coming in from Murali. What are some other hybrid platforms that we can consider in evaluation other than PhoneGap and Accelerator? AP, you want to talk about some other ones that you guys have seen?
Yeah, there's Mono. It's called Mono Touch by a company called Xamarin. Then there's also, there's a lot of, I guess, SAP's Unwired platform, which is Sybase's old Unwired platform. There is IBM Worklight, and IBM Worklight again is based on Apache Cordova, which is again based on PhoneGap. So there's not that many. There's only 3 or 4 really out there, and a lot of the ones that you see are essentially, because PhoneGap is open source now and it's called Apache Cordova. You'll see a lot of proliferation of tool vendors, and what they have under the hood is just Apache.
Great, and as a follow-up to that, Hex also asks, we've also been hearing a lot about GWT and PhoneGap, which I believe he's talking about as the Google Web Toolkit, and PhoneGap as a good option for the hybrid approach. Do you guys have any perspective that you can share on GWT and PhoneGap?
We have never used GWT in conjunction with PhoneGap. So GWT is this Java framework that Google has released for front-end UI. We use it extensively on the web. We've never used it in a mobile context, so unfortunately, I won't be able to give you any, any kind of valid information there.
Okay. And the last question, since we're pretty much out of time, I'll leave it to both of you guys with Adam, is will you have a platform requirement list for mobile app development to share with us? This is from Alpha. Those are very hard to build for multiple devices and platforms. Adam, you want to talk about that a little bit? No.
I'm not sure exactly what you mean by a platform requirement list. But I do recommend that you, what we do have is a standards type document, and maybe this is what you're getting at, which we certainly can share, and we can make that available as a template on our resources page, where we can set up a standard, kind of a standard best practice template guide for deciding on which platform to use and when. A lot of our clients are asking for this, and I think you're right. This is pretty hard to find out there, and from what we're seeing, it's extremely necessary in the market. So, Eric, we can take that as an action item to make it available on our website.
Great. And I know, folks, that we're out of time. It's exactly 2 o'clock. We have some other questions around Real Mobile, future of IBM Worklight, and a couple other ones. We have those Q&A. We have your email addresses, so we'll try to maybe respond to those to you guys directly or set up a follow-up call to answer some of those for you guys. I wanted to extend our appreciation for everybody's participation today. As Adam said, once this webinar ends, it'll drop you to a website where you can download slides with a click of a button if you would like those. And the recording from this webinar, if you want to be able to go back to it or send it to other colleagues at your organizations, will be available later today, probably before 5 o'clock Eastern. Again, I wanted to thank everyone for joining. We'll have our next webinar coming out probably the 2nd week of May. And we'll probably send some folks some emails regarding what that topic will be. Thanks again, everyone, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.